And baby, how one pregnant officer's fight changed Nigeria's police force forever. Her badge said protect and serve. Her pregnancy test said career over. What happened next shook Africa's largest police force to its core. The pregnancy test wasn't supposed to be positive. Officer Joyce Adekunle stared at the 2 pink lines that would end her career, her hand trembling as police sirens wailed in the distance. Through the thin walls of the station's bathroom, she could hear her fellow officers discussing their latest case, a high-profile corruption investigation she'd helped crack just last week. After just 8 months on the force, she had already made history, but not for the reasons she'd dreamed of. The irony wasn't lost on her. Just yesterday, she'd received a commendation for her work on the corruption case. Today, she would become known for something entirely different. The officer who dared to challenge Nigeria's most controversial police regulation, the law that said female officers could wear the badge, carry a gun, and die in the line of duty, but couldn't carry a child while unmarried. Joyce's journey to the force hadn't been easy. Growing up in Lagos' bustling Surulere district, she'd watched her single mother struggle to raise 3 children on a teacher's salary. Their tiny apartment above a noisy market became her first classroom in justice and injustice. She'd seen shopkeepers harassed by corrupt officials, watched domestic violence victims turned away from the local police station, and witnessed countless women's complaints dismissed without investigation. You can't change the system, her mother had warned when Joyce announced her decision to join the police academy. The system will change you. But Joyce had been determined to prove her wrong. She'd graduated top of her class at the police training school, breaking physical fitness records and scoring highest in criminal law. Her instructors had called her the future of Nigerian law enforcement. None of them could have predicted how prophetic those words would become. The morning sickness had started 2 weeks ago, but Joyce had blamed it on stress. The anti-corruption task force she'd been assigned to was working around the clock, investigating a network of officials stealing pension funds. She'd been so focused on gathering evidence, on proving herself worthy of the badge, that she'd ignored the signs her body was trying to tell her. Now, sitting in her patrol car outside the station, Joyce pulled out her phone and dialed the one person who might understand, her former academy roommate, Sarah Okafor. Sarah had left the force 6 months ago, but few knew the real reason why. "You too?" Sarah's voice cracked when Joyce told her the news. I thought maybe things had changed since." Sarah's story tumbled out, how she discovered her pregnancy 4 months into her service, how she'd been given an ultimatum: terminate the pregnancy or terminate her career. She'd chosen to leave quietly, watching her dreams of law enforcement fade away. "But you're different, Joyce," Sarah said firmly. "You're stronger than I was. And you have something I didn't evidence." Joyce knew that fighting Regulation 127 would require more than just her story. She needed evidence, patterns, and most importantly, allies. But in a force where silence was considered loyalty, finding either would prove dangerous. Her first breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Sergeant Major Ibrahim, a gruff veteran nearing retirement. She'd caught him staring at her one morning, expected the usual judgment, but instead received a folded piece of paper. "My daughter," he said quietly, avoiding eye contact. "She wore the badge too. 5 years ago." The paper contained names, 15 of them. All female officers, all dismissed under Regulation 127. Ibrahim's daughter was number 8. Late at night, after her shifts, Joyce began building her case. Each name led to another story, another injustice. She discovered patterns. High-performing officers suddenly disappeared from service records, promising careers vanished without explanation. More disturbing were the timing of these dismissals, many shortly after filing complaints against male superior officers. But the most damning evidence came from within the system itself. Department photos told a silent story, male officers proudly displaying their out-of-wedlock children at police functions, receiving promotions, celebrating their personal lives without consequence. The double standard wasn't just cultural, it was institutional. Assistant Commissioner Babajide's office felt colder than usual the day Joyce was summoned. His reputation for enforcing traditional values was well known throughout the force. "Officer Adekunle," he said, not looking up from her file. "I understand you've been asking questions." "Yes, sir. About Regulation 127. A regulation that has served this force well for generations." He finally met her eyes. "Your performance has been exemplary. It would be unfortunate if that changed." The threat was clear, but something in Joyce had changed. Fear had given way to anger, resignation to determination. "With respect, sir," she replied, "I believe what's unfortunate is losing good officers because of their gender." What followed was a campaign of subtle intimidation. Her case assignments changed. Suddenly she was working traffic instead of investigations. Her reports were scrutinized, her breaks monitored. Anonymous notes appeared in her locker, suggesting she think about her future. But for every act of intimidation, there was an act of solidarity. Female officers began sharing information through an underground network. USB drives appeared mysteriously on her desk, containing personnel records and internal memos. Even some male officers, disgusted by the discrimination, became quiet allies. Joyce's pregnancy was beginning to show by the time the legal proceedings began. Her mother, who had initially opposed her fight, now attended every hearing, sitting proudly in the front row. "I was wrong," she told Joyce one evening. "The system won't change you. You'll change the system." But the stress took its toll. Joyce developed complications, her blood pressure rising dangerously. Her doctor advised bed rest, her lawyers advised delaying the case. Joyce refused both. "Every day we wait," she argued, "another officer faces this choice. We don't stop." The case attracted media attention, first locally, then internationally. Her badge, her choice, trended across West Africa. Other police forces faced similar scrutiny. What started as one woman's fight became a movement. The department's defense began to crumble under public scrutiny. Internal documents leaked showing selective enforcement. Former officers came forward with stories of forced resignations and covered-up complaints. Then came the testimony that changed everything. Assistant Commissioner Babajide's former secretary revealed recordings, conversations where senior officers explicitly discussed using Regulation 127 to handle problematic female officers. "It's our insurance policy," one senior officer was heard saying. "If they won't play by our rules, we have this." The public outrage was immediate. Police headquarters faced protests. Female officers across Nigeria began wearing blue ribbons, small, silent symbols of solidarity with Joyce. The legal battle took unexpected turns. During one hearing, Joyce's team discovered that the police force had accidentally enforced Regulation 127 against a male officer who had gained sympathy weight during his wife's pregnancy. The clerical error led to weeks of chaos as the department struggled to explain why they dismissed him for unauthorized pregnancy. The incident became known as the Great Belly Misunderstanding and made international headlines. In a twist that had journalists scrambling for their notebooks, Joyce uncovered that Assistant Commissioner Babajide himself had been raised by a single mother who was forced to leave the police force due to the same regulation. When confronted with this revelation during cross-examination, Babajide broke down and admitted that his mother had never forgiven herself for leaving the force. The courtroom fell silent as he turned to Joyce and said, "I became the very thing that destroyed my mother's dreams." The evidence-gathering phase produced its own drama. While searching through archived records, Joyce discovered an entire underground network of former female officers who had created a shadow police force, solving cases the official force had abandoned. These ghost officers, as they came to be known, had solved more domestic violence cases in their unofficial capacity than the entire official domestic violence unit. During one particularly tense week, Joyce's pregnancy cravings led to an unexpected breakthrough. Her sudden appetite for plantain chips from a specific street vendor led her to stumble upon a major evidence-destroying operation behind the snack stand. As she would later testify, the baby wasn't just craving plantain chips, she was craving justice. The department's attempt to discredit Joyce backfired spectacularly when they hired a pregnancy expert who turned out to be a street performer specializing in fake pregnancy pranks. His testimony consisted mainly of circus tricks and ended with him accidentally pulling a rabbit out of what was supposed to be a medical textbook. The courtroom fell silent as Justice Amina Adamu began reading her verdict. She was known for her conservative interpretations, and many expected her to uphold tradition. "The question before us," she began, "is not simply about pregnancy or marriage. It is about equality under the law. It is about whether we can claim to seek justice while perpetuating injustice within our own ranks." Her ruling was comprehensive. Regulation 127 was declared unconstitutional. All officers dismissed under it were to be reinstated with back pay. The police force was ordered to review all gender-based regulations. But Justice Adamu wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, "This court finds evidence of systematic discrimination and retribution against female officers. A special committee will be established to investigate all dismissals under Regulation 127 for potential abuse of power." The trial's defining moment came when Joyce went into labor right in the middle of her testimony. But instead of rushing to the hospital, she insisted on finishing her statement. "Your Honor," she said between contractions, "this baby is just providing supporting evidence of workplace discrimination in real time." The court stenographer's transcript noted, "Objection, contraction, overruled, baby kicks, sustained." Baby Adana was technically born with a gavel in her hand, as the verdict was delivered exactly 2 minutes before she was. The judge later claimed she rushed the decision because, "I'm not having a baby born in my courtroom without proper legal status." The changes in the force were both immediate and gradual. Female officers were promoted to key positions. Recruitment of women increased dramatically. The police academy revised its curriculum to include gender sensitivity training. But the most significant changes were cultural. Male officers who had initially opposed Joyce began seeking her advice on cases. Young female cadets quoted her in their graduation speeches. Her story became part of police training worldwide, studied as an example of how one person's courage could transform an institution. The story gained additional chapters over the years. The ghost officers were officially recognized and their cases retroactively added to police records. Assistant Commissioner Babajide resigned and opened Nigeria's first police daycare center, naming it after his mother. The street vendor who unwittingly helped break the evidence-destroying ring became the official police force caterer, famous for her justice-served hot plantain chips. 10 years later, Joyce stood at the police academy podium, now a deputy commissioner, the youngest in Nigeria's history. Before her sat a new class of cadets, more than 40% of them women. "Your badge," she told them, touching her own, "is not just a symbol of authority. It's a symbol of responsibility. To serve, to protect, and sometimes to change what needs changing." In the front row, 10-year-old Adana watched her mother with pride. She wore a miniature police uniform, a gift from the Female Officers Association. "Mom," she had asked that morning, "did you ever regret it? Fighting when everyone said to stay quiet?" Joyce had shown her the museum display, her old badge, the court documents, the blue ribbon that had become a symbol of change. "The hardest battles," she told her daughter, "are always the most important ones. And the most important ones are never fought alone."